Last week, I did not do a podcast specifically talking about the All-Star game and All-Star weekend. I did a lot of previewing for it. I made mention that I was going to tape All-Star Saturday night and the All-Star game, that I was going to watch it by skipping the commercials because I did not feel like the NBA All-Star weekend was worth my time to, sit down for 3 hours of television anymore because the players and such don't care. And yes, well, the NBA All Star game was more entertaining this year than in years past. I don't think that has to do necessarily with the format of, the round robin or the U.S. versus the world. I think it has to do more so with Victor Wembanyama, Anthony Edwards, a few other players putting their foot down and saying, hey, we have to give our fans a good product this year because not only has the All Star game been dog walked, but the NBA, pretty much post Super Bowl, has been dog walked. And I did a podcast and I did some YouTube shorts last week talking about, my fixes for the NBA, not only in terms of rule changes, but in terms of, how we fix the regular season, how do we fix the playoffs, how do we fix the All-Star game. I think the NBA has a lot of changes to modernize itself here in the 2020s, if you will, but none of those changes involve tanking, which was actually the topic of conversation on national media shows all last week. And I do think tanking is getting overborne in the NBA. And Adam Silver has come out and said we need to have anti-tanking, and there's going to be new rules in place next year. Some of the ideas have been floated around about freezing the lottery odds of the trade deadline, or making it that you can't pick top four back-to-back years, or making it so all the teams in the lottery have the same odds. And I think it's a big of a joke as the play-in tournament is for the playoffs, and I think it's a big of a joke as the NBA Cup is for the regular season. The NBA does not have a tanking problem. Listen, the NFL is the only sport. The NHL has a lottery, Major League Baseball has a lottery, the NBA has a lottery. The NFL is the only sport that doesn't have a lottery, and yet we have no problem with the fact that the Jets, the Browns, for years, the Jaguars, the same teams seem to be picking it up of that NFL draft as well. The reason for that is not because they're tanking, because in the NFL you rarely see tanking, though I do think you're going to see it more and more as teams like the Raiders, the Browns, the Jets try to go after their franchise quarterback. But in the NFL, it's very understood. Patriots are bad for a couple of years. They get a quarterback, they get the right head coach. Bam, they're in the Super Bowl in the year two of Drake May, the year one of Mike Vrabel. In the NBA, it doesn't work like that. Even the Spurs, they get this generational prospect in Victor Wembanyama in the first two seasons of his career. He's terrible. Year three now, they're good. LeBron, his first 2 years in Cleveland, terrible team. Third year Eastern Conference semis, fourth year NBA Finals. Michael Jordan comes out and until he gets Phil Jackson, never even makes the NBA Finals. 7 years into his career, and then he goes on that run. So the NBA is different than the NFL, where, as in the NFL, you can get one draft and you can completely change the outlook of your team. But that's because you're drafting mostly 24, 25 year olds. In the NBA, you're drafting 19, 20 year olds. And most of these guys, for the past 4 or 5 years, have been from the G League. Or they've played 1 year of college basketball with not a lot of great coaching because they've been at small schools. And they're just not ready to come in and contribute. Where I think moving forward, because we have this draft this year that, of course, involves Cameron Boozer as well as Flemings from Arizona and other good talent. What we're seeing is stars are playing in college basketball. They're playing every night because of the NIL. They're staying in school instead of going to the NBA early because they could arguably make more money. If you're a great college basketball player, you can make more money in college than you can right out of the gate in the NBA, which is, again, I think good for developmental. It's good that these blue bloods with great coaches, Duke, Kansas, North Carolina, Arizona, Houston, etc., are keeping their blue chip, let's say. Now, of course, if you're a Cooper Flag, you're going to lead Duke, you're going to go be the number one pick, you're going to be great. But Cooper Flag this year, I mean, some people thought with a healthy AD and a healthy Kyrie, Dallas could be a legitimate contender in the Western Conference. Instead, AD is now in Washington. Kyrie Irving never played, and well, the Dallas Mavericks, even though Cooper Flag's been great, they're going to be a team that's chasing the lottery again. My point is, the Hornets have had some good draft picks. You look at they've been at the top of the draft, right? Michael Kidd Gilchrist back in the day was a bust. Brandon Miller, in my opinion, great player at Alabama for 1 year. He had, of course, that off the court weird incident. But he's a good player. LaMelo Ball, good player. They're still not nearly ready to compete, and they're in a bad Eastern Conference. Portland, Scoot Henderson was a G League talent, complete bust. Now they do got some talent, but they're bringing back Damian Lillard next year. We'll see how that elevates it. Again, the Spurs, Victor Wembanyama, right? They've been down for the past 2 years. Now they finally got Stephon Castle and Wembanyama and all this young talent, and away they go. Houston took a few years off to acquire Ahmed Thompson, who was from the G League. Of course, Jalen Green, also from the G League. Sengun, and they had to give up Jalen Green to go get Kevin Durant. But here they are now out of the lottery, and they may not be finals contenders with the injury to Fred VanVleet, but they are perennial playoff contenders. So, in my opinion, I've always said the Wizards are a franchise that's just sort of there. For sports, you think of a franchise like how are they still existing? It's been the Wizards. Ever since the Bradley Beal and John Wall era ended in Washington, they've been a complete doormat. But what this NBA second apron has done is it's made free agency less valuable. It's made trading more valuable because teams have to get under the second apron or pay a luxury tax. So, the Wizards go out, they trade for Trey Young from the Hawks. They trade for Anthony Davis, and next year you look at them and you think, they're finally going to be able to compete some in the East. But, the NBA is not an overnight league. You look at OKC. They traded for Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. What was that in the 2020 or 2021 season? 2 years after that, they were bad. That's how they got Chet Holmgren. That's how they got Jalen Williams. That's how they got all this young talent. And now they're able to, for years, sustain that success. And Sam Presti's been great at acquiring not only talent, but, getting the right picks and finding the right talent and finding the right coach and building the team. And, Indiana, bad for a few years, right? They trade for Pascal Siakam. They're bad. All of a sudden, Tyrese Haliburton bursts onto the scene, and they go from, a first roundish team to an NBA Finals team in 1 year. So that's my point. Is I've always believed that at some points the NBA draft lottery has been rigged. Obviously, the classic Ewing lottery in '85. I thought the Cavs lottery in 2014 to get Andrew Wiggins to get LeBron back to Cleveland was rigged. I thought they should have rigged the Zion Williamson lottery instead of New Orleans for him to go to the Knicks. I don't think that happened, but I do think that in 2012, the league-owned Pelicans winning the lottery was not a coincidence. But I don't think we need a lottery. And I don't think the NBA is a tanking issue. Listen, the Jazz, yeah, they're pulling players in the fourth quarter and they're trying to lose games. Why? Because they have to acquire more talent to be better in the long term. I think tanking, if you do it right, works. I mean, look at the Sixers. They're tanking. In my opinion, it did eventually work. It didn't account to a championship, which why people say it didn't work because trusting the process didn't work. But they made the wrong picks with Jahlil Okafor and Malcolm Fultz and even Ben Simmons. They made the right pick with Joel Embiid. You could have made a case that they didn't melt down in 2021 against the Hawks, or even that 2019 team that had Jimmy Butler took the eventual champion Raptors to Game 7. Like, the Sixers had good teams. It's not like they didn't have good teams. They just missed their window, which is different than saying tanking didn't work. So no, the NBA does not have a tanking problem. There's going to be 5 or 6 teams that are bad. It's a front office issue, and the NBA draft has never been filled with 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, premium blue chip talents. But you can make an argument that now it is. And I think that draft picks are going to be more valuable in the NBA moving forward, which is why I think if teams use their resources right and suspend a couple years and get those picks right, they can be better for the long term. No, I don't think tanking is an issue. No, I don't think the lottery needs to be fixed. This is just the way sports work. Franchises ebb and flow, good to bad. It's good ownership and it's good management that keeps contending teams and well-run teams more on the championship window than not in the championship window for the foreseeable future. I guarantee you, if the Wizards and Hornets had better ownership and better guys running their teams and making draft picks and making selections, those two teams would not be in the basement every single year. And you could say the same things about the likes of the Kings and the Jazz over in the Western Conference. Like that clip from the Brandsworth podcast? If so, make sure you go down there and hit that subscribe button. While you're down there hitting the subscribe button, make sure to also hit the notification bell so you never miss another upload. And make sure you check out all the other clips from the Brandsworth podcast right here on YouTube.